Welcome to Act a Dad, the Awesome Dad Show. My name is Mark Savant, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. I was really happy that he reached out to me. Today I'm joined by Mr. Kenneth Jolivet. He is a six-time author. He's written 6 books, over 20 years of military experience in the Air Force, father of 3, awesome dad. I cannot wait to get into today's episode. Ken, how are you doing today?
Hey, Mark, thanks. Thanks for having me. Doing good here.
Well, it's my pleasure. When you reached out to me, I was looking at the title of your book, Society Kills Men, Feminism Loses When Half Are Held Back. And when I first saw the title of your book, I was a little bit like, whoa, this is going to be an intense topic, an intense subject.
Yeah.
Very, very touchy. But I think it's an important conversation to have. So I'm looking forward to getting into it. Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes, I just want to ask you a question about authorship, writing books. What made you decide I want to write books? What was your calling to get into that?
Well, it fits right into this whole topic of dads and fathers and family and life. What happened was I went through a divorce in 2008, and it was such a traumatic experience that as I went on to travel the world a little bit, because I had the luxury of being retired from the US Air Force, so I had a little bit of money that I could spend and take myself away from normal life in society. So I said, okay, I'm going to travel. And as I did that, and I met some people along the way, and some of my closest friends, they said to me, you should write a book. And of course, I laughed at that to begin with. And then after about a year of it, and I went through another kind of interesting scenario with a young lady, and I learned that, you know what, I'm not ready. I need a break from women, and I need to sit and figure out what I'm doing with my life. So I wrote a book. The first one, Make Sure She's Worth It. You can get by the title, Make Sure She's Worth It. Your money and your heart are just the start. That was the subtitle. So the idea was for a man to know himself, to realize what he's doing, and then to live his life how he sees fit. It would kind of fit what they call MGTOW now, in a way. Men going.
So question, would you say that, look, anytime you go through a divorce, it's going to be a traumatic experience, very challenging. 50% of marriages end up there. I'm sure you never start off the marriage expecting that.
That's right.
But did you find that it was almost like therapeutic in a way to be creative, to get your story out there, to get your voice out there?
You have to be active. You cannot sit idle. You definitely need to talk to some people, whoever that might be. So there's this huge debate. Do men need to talk? Or do we do action? And I'd say we do a bit of both. Mostly action, some talk. And I definitely had to do that. And that's why I went on a long, long walk, but also that's why I wrote. And it's very therapeutic. You need to do such things.
Well, I found that just by doing this show where I'm interviewing awesome dads, I wouldn't necessarily say it's been therapeutic for me per se, but it's just helped me to level up my knowledge. I feel like the more you research and get ingrained into a topic, the more you learn about it, the more you grow as a human being. So
yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I found that, you know, I didn't set on this journey to be an author, but the first book brought in a second book, and on it went. And now this current book, Society Kills Men, and the subtitle, Feminism Loses When Half Are Held Back, that's kind of a tricky bit there, that feminism loses because as a movement, because we have to work together as genders. Men, we cannot fight together because men's problems are women's problems and women's problems are men's problems. We have to live together. And then it also is a play on that Malala who got shot in the head for being educated in Afghanistan by the Taliban. And that was their slogan. So they're saying that if you don't educate women, then they're going to lose, the world is going to lose with half a gender, half the sex. So that's kind of a play on their thing. And then the Society Kills Men part is that it's death by 1,000 cut. It's not just the one thing, it's the dismal tide, as they say. So yeah, I needed to write about that, and that's therapy. But men also do things by action, don't we? I think, mostly. That's how men do things.
I like to think so. I mean, there's definitely a lot of puffery out there on Instagram and Facebook, right? But it's taking action that really counts, and having the conversation. But I really like this subtitle, not because I'm against women or against
No,
feminism or whatnot.
no,
Like, I think women are very important. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and I love her to death. I want her to be able to do whatever she wants to do.
that's
Right?
right.
If she
Yeah,
wants to be a CEO, be a CEO. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, be a stay-at-home mom. But I think that's really important. The problem, though, and I'm not going to say that feminism is a bad thing per se, but like anything, right, it can be twisted and distorted to end up
exactly.
stepping on people. How do you think, and I do think that that's a problem with some percentage of feminists out there. How do you think that that's transpired based on your research?
Well, I think it's pretty evident now that what started out as equality, and that was true feminism in
Mm-hmm.
pre-1970s, but people like Bettina Arndt in Australia, who has a slogan that feminism is a destructive force. Christina Hoff Sommers would also tell you, Milo Yiannopoulos, he will tell you it's a cancer. So it's not that you couldn't say that feminism was a bad thing. In fact, if you look at my subtitle, it's asking for equality for men just like it is for women. But the problem is feminism today is about superiority. It's about a privilege for something that they didn't earn. And unfortunately, people don't know that feminism started from leftism, culturism, Marxism, and it's about destroying the family. And in Greenwich Village in New York, it's well documented that in the 1970s, there was a very unfortunate publication of what they really wanted to do, but I don't have my notes, but essentially they wanted to destroy the family. And to destroy the family, they say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to destroy the father, the head of the household. How are we going to destroy the father? Well, we're going to destroy the man. How are we going to destroy the man? Well, we're going to destroy the boy. So unfortunately now today, and we're going to destroy masculinity, and that's where they've gone. So it's well documented that feminism and the suffragettes and the right to vote, if you don't know, back in the mid 1850s, when the push started to get the right to vote, one of the famous slogans was voting for women, chastity for men. So already the movement wasn't just about women getting the right to vote. They wanted to tie men up and stop our sexuality. So, and they were militant groups, both in the US and in the UK. And yeah, it wasn't a peaceful movement. It was a very militant movement, and it's grown. And unfortunately, from the 70s, it's changed flavor quite a bit. So in the last 50 years, and now the last sort of 10 years, it's moved on to things like toxic masculinity. And it's part of the whole process of shaming and blaming men. And that's what they have to do in order to rise, unfortunately. It's a zero-sum game.
So you have this whole Me Too movement, which to me makes a lot of sense. Like, if I think that there's places in times where it's just not appropriate to touch someone in a certain way, and I think that we can all acknowledge that that has gone on and it probably still goes on, right? But it's so hard when you say, okay, when you put all men into this category of being chauvinistic or sexist or whatnot, because of maybe it seems to me like feminism has almost been politicized in a certain way. It's so hard to get a politician to say, yeah, men are probably doing pretty badly. We need to look at what's happening with men. We need to look at what's happening with fathers. Like, so I interviewed Thomas Fidler, the president of the Fathers' Rights Movement, a couple months ago. He was on the Active Dad, Awesome Dad show. And he pointed out that about 85% of dads after a divorce see their kids 4 days a month.
Yeah.
Why do you think we're not talking about this? This is something that really chills me to the bone to think about that.
Well, you brought up two things. First of all, it's true that you ever heard of the gender voting gap? Since the 1980s, with the right to vote, it took until 1979 for women to equal men on the right to vote or voting, exercising it. So from the 80s onwards, women have voted more than men. And women have always steered toward big government and things that the government can do for the women, the children, security. It kind of makes sense to you if you think about it. Abolition of alcohol, health departments, big government is what you get.
Sure.
So you have that. Now, politicians know that the women have the vote. Hence, You have Obama in 2011 doing letters to the universities under Title IX to essentially make there out to be a rape crisis on campus, and therefore you have the kangaroo courts, and you end up with lack of due process for men accused of all kinds of things, and things like that. So going to the other thing, there were stats on fathers not seeing their kids, and that's about right. Another stats, National Center for Fathering, shows it at 78%, where children have little to no contact with the fathers. And the breakdown on that is 22% see their kids once a week, 29% less than 4 times a month, and 27% zero contact. Put that into the frame of 40% of kids being born out of wedlock, 70% for people of color, and 25% of women are the breadwinners. And 25% of the kids are raised without a father as a total number. So why don't they care? I'll tell you why they don't care. I think it's Dr. Warren Farrell again about men are disposable. And in divorce and family law, and I remember this with my wife at the time, she told me fathers are replaceable because most good-looking, average, decent women can always replace the man that left with a new man at some point. You see it all the time. So fathers are replaceable, men are replaceable, husbands are replaceable. And look at war. Men have always been disposable. 98% of the war deaths, men. All the top 20 jobs, it's 10 of them are not, like 98% men dying, and who cares? Women don't want those jobs, and society doesn't care that we're doing those jobs. Look at jail, the disposability of men in jail. 93% are men, 7% women. Now they don't even want to put women in jail. They want to put women in rehab centers. So men are disposable in society, and it fit for a long time. If you think about it, you didn't mind being disposable. I was proud to join the US Air Force and die for my country, die for my family, if it really made an impact. But is that the reality? But the reality is men are disposable, and we don't speak up.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for your service. Again, anyone that's willing to go out, sacrifice their life and their time for my safety, an immense amount of gratitude and respect, Ken. So thank you very much for
you're welcome.
being part of the U.S. Armed Forces. Thank you. Thank you. So one of the points you brought up a lot of good points there, Ken, but I want to break this down a little bit. You mentioned that men are disposable after divorce and whatnot. But don't you think that there's men out there who want to upgrade their model and like, hey, my wife is old and she's not quite as tight as she used to be, so I'm gonna go out for the next model? Do you think that plays into it at all? Do you think that's maybe why part of the narrative as to why women got so angry and are starting to kind of, kind of fight back in a way, I suppose?
A very little degree. Like everything, there's always a bit of truth in something like that. But let's just go over the stats.
Sure.
50% of marriages break up on the first, 66% on the second marriage. Third marriages break up 75% of the time. Women file for divorce 75 to 80% of the time. And they're not doing it, as Dr. Warren Farrell says, for communication reasons. There's a lot of other reasons, but I'll add a few more numbers. Men and women today are cheating, both are cheating at the rate of 50% each. Now, yes, men traditionally have, let me go back a little bit about Bettina Arndt, who's a sex therapist in Australia.
Sure.
And she's got a slogan that says, the sex drought marriages, sex starved men. Now, I find it rather amazing that men can be so sex starved in their marriages, and yet they don't file for divorce. They hang in there hoping and hoping, is tonight the night? Is it going to be this week? This sort of thing. Yet 80% of the women still file for the divorce for things like, he's not making me as happy as I should be, and things like that. Very trivial things. It's not a joke. And communication is one of those things. But the highest thing that does it is, if you're unemployed, you have the very highest chance of being divorced of all things. And so flip that one, and you'll also find that the men who are most successful and have money are the most desired by all the women. And they will be they'll be the ones more than likely to be married. There's a saying, something about Show me a successful man who's a bachelor and he's going to be the one who's going to get married, you know, they'll be all after you, that kind of thing. So, and then we have sayings about, you know, women are sex objects, but men are success objects. It's okay for a man to be an ATM and a money, and it does fit. Women in hypergamy, you've heard of this probably. Women always want to marry up. They want more educated men. They want more successful men, and they want men with more money. And that's okay. Men accepted that. That's why the hierarchy is there, that men are competitive. They want to succeed. They work hard. It all fits man's traits to often get the woman.
So I'm curious about that, Ken. So let's go a little bit deeper into that. One of the things that Dr. Warren Farrell brought to me in my interview with him on the Awesome Dad Show was that men are doing horribly. Boys are doing horribly. Suicide, depression, violent crimes, drug abuse, through the roof. Statistically, men are much more vulnerable to all these terrible imprisonment.
Much more. Yeah.
So what do you think that primary driver is? Do you think it's because men feel they're disposable, and or do you think it's because men feel like I have this constant pressure to save face, to provide, to be there, to, you know, and that's one of the biggest challenges for fathers. I think you have to provide for your family, for your kids, for your boss, for your employees, for your family, for your country, for your society.
Yep.
Do you think that those are the primary drivers? What else have you found in your research?
Well, when I was doing the research for this book, I always thought feminism had a big role to play, and they do. But feminism would not exist without gynocentrism. Gynocentrism is a strange beast. It goes back to the 1200s, mid-centuries, with the Queen of Aquitaine, and she brought in chivalry. Remember the knights on the horses and the whole kind of chivalry thing and love? Sure. Well, it was her and her grandfather, and this is a strange thing. Her grandfather, traditionally, men went to war for country, God, and king. He was the first king to say he went to war for his wife, because his words roughly, she suffered me in bed, so I have to suffer her on the battlefield as a sacrifice. I kid you not. So that's where it came from. And so the idea is that, gynocentrism is about bowing down to women, the knight in shining armor, do everything for the woman. And I'm just going to read this, and it's the only thing I'm going to read from a book, because this is shocking. And this will tell you that women are not oppressed and have not been oppressed for centuries. This Modesta Pozzo wrote back in 1590. And here's the quote: "Don't we see that men's rightful task is to go to work and wear themselves out, trying to accumulate wealth, as though they were our factors and stewards, so that we can remain at home like the lady of the house, directing their work and enjoying the profit of their labors. That, if you like, is the reason why men are naturally stronger and more robust than us, so they can put up with the hard labor they must endure in our service." Now that goes back from 1590, and that's just to carry on from the original 1200s gynocentrism with Queen Aquitaine. So that same philosophy, if you think about it, never hit a woman, right? Never hit a girl, buy her a drink, open the door for her. This stuff is carried on through my whole life. Only now am I seeing that with equality and feminism, now they're saying, don't open the door for me and things like that. But it's really gynocentrism that's ingrained in our culture that made you the gentleman that you are, as you appear to be to me. And why we do for girls, you know, and daddy's girl and all these things. We want to provide and protect. We're not trying to oppress women. We have it in our nature to provide and protect. But unfortunately, that's been seen as controlling behavior and things like that.
So I want to kind of apply this to fatherhood in a way here, Ken.
Okay.
So one of the things that I've found, just to kind of, again, bring this back to fathering, parenting, divorce and whatnot, when it comes to genders, it feels like there's a lot of resources for women when it comes to parenting, very few for men. And most of the stuff for men is like dad jokes and dad memes and stuff like that. It's not really applicable to actually executing parenting on a day-to-day basis, right? When you watch the media is all about Mom is the all-star. Dad
Yeah,
is the guy who messes everything up and she has to clean up for it, right?
that's
We've
right.
seen that, play out over decades. And I don't know if there's a direct correlation or if that type of attitude has led to where we are today. But I find that most fathers, most men do very, very little to prepare for fatherhood, right? That most
Right.
men have this attitude of I'm going to wing it, or I'm just going to do it like my parents did it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that type of attitude, that I'll wing it attitude, is part of the reason why dads aren't seen as a prominent parenting figure. Do you have an
Hmm.
opinion on that, Ken?
Yeah, a couple things you said there, but first I'll address that one. To be honest, I have another book called Love, Marriage, and Divorce, Through Pain We Emerge. And in that, and there's been some other authors in there that I talk about. Believe it or not, most people stumble into marriage. They don't even think about it. And that's what I write about. If you think about it, most people marry for all kinds of reasons. And often they don't think about who they're marrying, why they're marrying, and things like that. So not only is it that people don't think about, I'm going to be a father before they become a father, you should really think about that. And they used to do that through the church. You know, they would ask you key questions. Have you thought about why you're marrying? Have you thought about parental, how you're going to raise your kids, where you're going to live, what are your standards, these kind of things. So not only is it that men don't often think about it, but women don't either. And women don't even think about who they're marrying necessarily.
Mm.
So it's a common problem that most people don't think about the huge decisions that they make regarding marriage and children. In fact, most pregnancies seem to be an accident.
Well,
I
when
don't
you
know.
look at 40% of kids being born outside of marriage, I'd say that's probably accurate. I don't know exactly how we got to that 40%, but
Yeah,
and for sure, there's a lot of oopsies out there. I
yeah,
mean, like that's part of it. And so that leads into the second part here, where like, at least for me, when I had my first child, like something deep inside of me, deep genetic root kind of came out and said, okay, your paternal instincts, right, are going to come forward right now.
yeah,
And I think that triggers a lot of fathers. Most fathers say, okay, I'm going to be a dad. This is my role. I'm gonna go all in. And again, I think that a lot of fathers should be more into that role and be more involved with educating themselves. Um, but that's a little beside the point. One of the things I think that most men don't think about, and one of the reasons why people aren't talking about divorce and alienation enough, is because when you hold your kid for the first time, when you're going on your honeymoon, you're not thinking about, oh crap, in 5 years I'm going to be fighting for my right to see my kid. I
no,
interviewed MTV Challenge star Derek Kaczynski on my show a few weeks ago, and he had mentioned that he woke up every day with his kid, and then one day the relationship with his wife didn't work out, and he had to go from every day to almost 0 days in fighting for that right. What do
yeah.
you think we need to change as a society or as fathers so that we're more on a level of, again, moms and dads together working together are going to give us the best result?
Hmm. Wow, that's the big $1 million
It's a
question,
tough
isn't it?
one. It's a
Billion
tough one. I
dollar
want to lay it
question.
on you.
Well, I think the first thing you got to do is you've got to change the family courts to this presumption. And I tell you that just reminds me of some laws that are changing here. And if it's not changed in the U.S. yet, it's on its way. But there's laws here in England that say the rule of law that the father is the legal guardian of the child is abolished. I kid you not. They have abolished that thing. And then the second thing is this. So Deputy Prime Minister Harriet Harman here in the UK says that you cannot, the assumption that a father is good for the family is also cannot be taken for granted, or that it is a benefit having a presence in the house or for society, and says that anybody can replace a father. So remember, I told you earlier that my wife made that statement years ago. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister was saying this 10 years ago. So they've made it into acts. So the first thing is, you cannot allow in America any politician to change a law in that kind of a way. The second thing is you've got the states. There are more states in America that are now going into shared parenting. So as fathers, we need to insist on that, because as Warren Farrell talks about, and I totally agree with everything he says in his book, except for the part about communication problems and feminism not being a detrimental part of society and how it's harming us. So men's rights need to be there, because look, men don't have rights in family law. 90% of the custody goes to the woman. Why? Because the courts assume that the bond with the mother is bigger or more stronger than the bond with the father. And we know that's not true. And we also know that fathers have to have time with their children, boys and girls, because if the girls don't have presence with their fathers, they also go into drugs, they get teenage pregnancies, and they're vulnerable to being raped and things like that. So it's not good for a girl, but as Dr. Warren Farrell says, boys are at the most danger, because I guess it makes sense that boys need a mentor and they need the like gender to survive. And there's so much damage. So we as fathers have to fight to get co-parenting or shared parenting 50-50. And we have to have access. And it cannot be allowed, like over here in England, when a mother is in contempt of court and breaks some of these orders, nothing happens to her. We need to make sure that the courts enforce and punish those women. The reason they don't punish them is why? The kids will be put into a foster home or social services. They never think of putting it back to the father, but that's why the judges never punish the women. So we have to do things like that, you know, to make sure that the courts actually enforce the orders for visitation, make it equal, give the teeth to the courts, make them do it, and then the fathers have to step in. So this would be a step in the right direction, but I'm telling you, you got to be very careful to let the politicians push away the rights of fathers. And as we're seeing, single women have no shame. The state is now the dad. The state enables women to have babies outside of marriage, because there are more than 80 federal benefits that a woman can go and claim. There are 15 departments in the government that women can go to for their health, for their needs. There's not one for men. And you know, as a veteran, I was shocked. This is the kind of gynocentrism that's going in the Department of, in our government. There is even a branch, there was a Veterans Administration to help veterans. Now there's a section just for women within the Veterans Administration. They don't have the money to deal with the vets, but now they have money to deal with women vets, who are the very small number anyway.
Well, and I think, I think it's important that we point out that, you know, women need these resources. It's really important that women have resources like healthcare. I'm not, you know, I think that, you know, women, if a woman wants to have sex before marriage, like, do you? I'm not about the government getting involved in people's personal life and in the bedroom and all that. But at the same time, what you're talking about is a really common thread that I've run into in a lot of the dads that they talk to that are creating movements. They say, well, I'm starting this because when I went for help, there was nothing. There was nothing. Exactly. And I find that to be just a really disturbing trend. And I'm glad that there's dads like you out there, Ken, that are making a difference, that are bringing light to this. Dr. Warren Farrell with the boy crisis, really important. And there's a lot of really great things that I think are happening. Maybe I'm an optimist, but
no, we can make a difference. And you just brought up something, not to cut you off, but just think of domestic violence, for example. 99.9 something percent of the shelters are for women.
Yeah.
There are 2 shelters that I know of in America for men. Men can't even, did you know that 40% of the severely injured domestic violence people are men? And half the time they don't even go get treatment for it, but 40% severely injured. 70% of the domestic violence of non-reciprocal, in other words, the woman hits the man, but the man won't hit her back. 71% is the woman doing that to the man. It's pretty much a 50-50 equation on domestic violence. But what happened is now feminism has twisted and redefined the language. And thank God President Trump put it back to the normal definition of violent type of stuff. But life is tough, as you know, as a married man. It's living together, and learning to live together in harmony is not always easy. So criminalizing day-to-day life is no way to make a man into a criminal and a woman seeking help and getting help to actually get divorced. So, you know, providing all these shelters for women for, I don't want to say, you know, it's hard to know personally what they went through, but it cannot be things like so-called financial abuse and emotional abuse and things like that that really haven't always been traditionally considered domestic abuse. And let's face it, men have gone through a hell of a lot of that. You ever heard of the kitchen pass?
I have not. The kitchen
You haven't
pass.
heard? Oh, right. Well, maybe that shows my age. It used to be that, you know, you had to get your wife's permission to be able to go out, let's say, to the movies, go have a beer with the guys, this kind of thing. So yeah, maybe that's a generational thing. But, you know, women have their way of nagging in the house. They spend more of the money on the budget. It's well proven that women, 9 out of 10 women spend the budget for the family and the household. They make up 85% of the consumer spending. So is it financial abuse if the man is trying to keep a budget in the house and say, look, you're spending a bit too much over there on that credit card and things like that, or we got to save some money for the future and our pension and things like that. So it's a very fine line when you start talking about what is financial abuse, emotional abuse, because emotionally we both suffer within relationships. So different kinds of things.
Well, I mean, so look, the criminal justice system is built upon innocent until proven guilty. And when you take that out and there's these smear campaigns against men because of something that maybe they did something horrible, right? But maybe not. Maybe it's maybe they're equal, right? Maybe the wife and the husband are equal, and they've both been equally cruddy to each other. It's a complicated topic, but I think certainly with the amount of fathers that I've spoken to that tell me, hey, I went to family court, or I went to see the judge, or I went here to the family, and you know, my ex would get up there and just lie about me, and there was no penalty, there was no problem with it. It was looked at like, okay, well, fool me once, shame on no one. Fool me twice, shame on no one. Fool me 3 times, shame on no one. So there's got to be accountability. Like if you're going to go into a court of law and talk about someone, it's got to be honest. And I hope that we're moving in that direction. So I really, again, appreciate what you've written up in this book. Ken, before I let you go here, I just want to, again, thank you for being a guest here on Act Dad, the Awesome Dad Show. If y'all love the episode, you can definitely see a lot more at actdad.com. And you can also read all about Ken's books at societykillsmen.com. There will be links here in the show notes. But I also want to go through a quick few rapid fire questions, a little bit lighter, kind of lighten it up just a little bit. So Ken, I love stories. I love storytelling. What's your favorite story to either read or tell to your kids?
It's a story, but it's also a film. I absolutely love Rocky Balboa and the whole series of Rocky. He's got some fantastic messages in there, and it applies for both men and women, boys and girls. The simple thing when he says in Rocky 5 about it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and get up and keep fighting and keep going. When he tells his son off, remember? He's hiding in the shadows. So he had to tell his son off at 20 years old or whatever he was. So there's a lot of knowledge in the Rocky series.
Love that. What about favorite vacation to go on with your family? When you go anywhere, where are you going?
Well, I've traveled a lot of the world. So if it's a past trip, I'd say Costa Rica is a pretty special place. Lots going on there, green, the environment. You've got the ocean on both sides, Pacific, the Atlantic, biodiverse, jungles, all that sort of stuff. Brazil is a fantastic place. You can travel that country and see a lot of different things. And Europe as a continent, it's so diverse. Every 2 hours you can be speaking a different language, different food. Europe is a place to go. Most Americans can at least make it to Europe. So while it's good, fantastic place.
Lots of different architecture. I actually visited Italy, Rome with my wife years ago on our honeymoon. And it was just so, like every corner, it was just like, whoa,
Wow.
it's an ancient artifact or an obelisk, or I'm eating a McDonald's hamburger in front of the Pantheon. It's just really,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
unique, really
Yeah.
unique place. Okay, Ken, big question here.
Yeah.
Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
I like it, but don't like it. Yay.
Okay, yay, good. Good, good, good. Favorite activity to do with your family? What's your favorite activity?
Swimming, ocean, pool, when they were
Awesome.
younger. Now, with my wife, walking
Awesome.
and the
Awesome. Good
gym,
walk.
and the gym.
Okay. You could put something on a billboard to reach millions and millions of people, Ken. What do you put on that billboard?
Stop the gender war. Let's be equal. Let's talk.
Love that. Love that. Ken, before I let you go here, tell everyone, where can we find you? What are we plugging?
SocietyKillsMen.com. That's where I'm trying to have the focus of my work, that you can then look at it. I'm going to increase the blog on there. It's new. It's only from June when I published the book in August. So it's new, but also you can find me on Amazon. And also I really like Twitter, and my ID at Kenneth Jolivet, just as it's spelled. I love Twitter. Very effective for short words. That's how I found you. That's how I found a few people.
That's right. Well, Kenneth, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I really respect what you're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing what book number 7 looks like, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's enjoy book number 6 and really focus on bringing equality back. You know,
Exactly.
we're all just trying to live our best lives here. So, Ken, thank you so much for being on Act a Dad, the Awesome Dad Show.
Thank you very much, Mark. I salute you for what you're doing.